The arrangement that destroyed everything. She had everything until she wanted someone else. Part 1. The Discovery. Chapter 1. The House on the Bluff. The Whitmore estate sat on a promontory of land in Pacific Palisades, Los Angeles, where the Santa Monica Canyon opened up to reveal the endless blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean. The house itself was a modern masterpiece, 12,000 square feet of glass, steel, and imported Italian marble, designed by a Pritzker Prize-winning architect who had once declared that he built monuments to human ambition. Every surface reflected light, every angle was deliberate, every detail creamed wealth. The infinity pool seemed to spill directly into the ocean. The wine cellar held 3,000 bottles. The home theater had cost more than most houses in America. I had grown up in this house. It had been my father's monument before it became mine, and his father's before that. The Whitmores had been bankers in California since 1887, when my great-great-grandfather Ezra Whitmore had arrived from Boston with nothing but a leather satchel and a determination to make something of himself. By the time he died, he controlled more assets than most of the banks he'd once begged for loans. The family fortune had grown and contracted and grown again through generations, through the Roaring Twenties and the Great Depression and the wars and the recessions and the tech booms, until it culminated in me, Nathaniel Whitmore's, the sole heir to a legacy I had never asked for and could never escape. I was 44 years old. Victoria, my wife, was 36. We had been married for 9 years, and for most of that time I had believed we were happy. Not blissfully, impossibly happy, not the kind of happiness you read about in novels or see in movies, but the steady, comfortable happiness of two people who had found an equilibrium. She had her life, I had mine. We came together for dinners and events and the occasional trip abroad. We slept in the same bed, though rarely at the same time, and when we did, we lay on our respective sides like strangers sharing a train compartment, each lost in our own thoughts. The morning everything changed began, as I said, like every other morning. I woke at 5:30, as I had done for 20 years, and went for a run along the bluffs while the rest of the city slept. The air was cool and damp, carrying the salt smell of the ocean. My footsteps echoed on the pavement. My breath fogged in the early light. I ran until my muscles burned and my lungs ached, and when I returned, Victoria was still in bed, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like a halo, her breathing slow and even. She looked younger when she slept. In sleep, the hard edge that had crept into her face over the past few years, the subtle tightening around her eyes, the coolness that had replaced the warmth I remembered from our early days, softened into something that reminded me of the woman I had fallen in love with. Victoria Crane from Greenwich, Connecticut, daughter of Harrison Crane, the shipping magnate who had made his fortune moving containers across the Pacific. She had been 23 when we met, fresh out of Columbia, working as a junior buyer for a fashion house in Manhattan. I had been 35, in Los Angeles for a conference, staying at the Peninsula Beverly Hills. A mutual friend had introduced us at a party in the Hollywood Hills. I remembered the way her eyes had sparkled when she laughed, the way she had touched my arm when she spoke, the way she had made me feel like the most interesting man in the room, like someone worth knowing. That was 9 years and countless arguments ago. Somewhere along the way, we had lost each other. Or perhaps we had never really found each other at all. I showered and dressed and went downstairs to the kitchen, where Maria, our housekeeper, had left coffee and a copy of the Los Angeles Times. The headline was about the Fed's latest interest rate decision. I read it distractedly, my mind already on the day ahead, the board meeting at Whitmore Capital, the fund proposal I needed to review, the dinner that evening with the Japanese delegation. Victoria descended the stairs at 7:16, wearing a silk robe the color of dove gray. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked rested, beautiful, and utterly indifferent to my presence. "You're up early," she said, kissing my cheek. Her lips were cool, recently glazed. "Board meeting at 10, I replied. "Whitmore Capital is considering a new fund. East Side Tech Sector." She poured herself coffee from the French press. I'll be at the salon until 2. Lunch with the Martinson women at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Probably won't be back until evening. This was the architecture of our marriage: shared meals when convenient, separate social calendars, and a shared bed that had become more ritual than passion. I had grown accustomed to it. I had, if I was honest, grown grateful for it. Passion was exhausting. Passion required energy and attention and a willingness to be vulnerable, to expose the soft parts of yourself to another person. I had spent my entire life learning to protect those soft parts. Victoria, I suspected, had done the same. We ate breakfast together in silence. She scrolled through her phone, reading messages, responding with brief bursts of typing. I read the financial section. Outside, the ocean glittered under the morning sun, indifferent to our quiet domesticity. Anything exciting today? I asked, more to fill the silence than out of genuine curiosity. The usual, she said without looking up. Hair, lunch, gossip. Carolyn Martinson is convinced her husband is having an affair. She's convinced it's with his assistant, but I'm not sure. He seems too boring for an affair. Too boring? You know what I mean. Henry Martinson wears the same suit every day and orders the same entree at every restaurant. Can you imagine him sneaking around, having clandestine meetings? It doesn't fit. Maybe that's the point, I said. Maybe the most boring men make the best secret keepers. She looked up from her phone then, her eyes meeting mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Is that what you think? That boring men are secretly more interesting? I think everyone has depths, I said. Even Henry Martinson. She returned to her phone. I doubt that. We parted ways after breakfast, she to her car, I to my study. I worked until noon, reviewing the fund proposal, answering emails, taking a conference call with our Hong Kong office. The sun moved across the sky. The shadows shifted in my study. I lost myself in the familiar rhythm of work, of numbers and projections, and the endless negotiation of power and capital. It was at 2 in the afternoon, when I needed to print a contract for the Whitmore Capital Partnership, that I discovered the phone. The printer was in the study off our bedroom, a room Victoria had decorated in shades of cream and gold, with upholstered chairs and a writing desk that had belonged to my grandmother. I had gone upstairs to retrieve the contract, which was saved on our shared server. The printer was in the cabinet beneath the writing desk. I opened it to get paper and found, instead, a phone. It was a cheap burner, a Samsung slider, the kind you could buy for $60 at any Best Buy. It was wrapped in a soft cloth, as if to protect it, and buried beneath a stack of old bank statements and utility bills. I might never have found it if I hadn't needed the paper. I might have lived the rest of my life in blissful ignorance, believing my marriage was merely empty rather than actively toxic. I should have put it back. I should have ignored it, closed the cabinet, gone back to my work. But something, some instinct, some cold finger of dread made me flip it open. The battery was dead, but I found a charger in the desk drawer and plugged it in. I sat in Victoria's cream-colored chair and I waited, watching the screen flicker to life. The text messages, when they appeared, were enough to detonate my entire existence. I can't stop thinking about you. Tonight was everything. When can I see you again? I'm desperate. Every time I look at him, I think about you. It's getting harder to hide. I love you. I love you. I love you. The phone number was saved as D in her contacts. The messages went back months, 8 months, 10 months, perhaps longer. They weren't just flirtatious. They were the kind of messages that only come from a place of absolute physical surrender, of a body and soul given over completely to another person. I scrolled through them with mounting horror. There were photographs: Victoria in a hotel room, Victoria on a beach, Victoria in a car. Her body twisted in pleasure, her face contorted in ecstasy. I had not seen her look that way in years. Perhaps I had never seen her look that way at all. The messages grew more explicit. They described dates and trysts and the mundane logistics of adultery, the hotels they'd used, the lies she'd told me, the excuses she'd crafted. She had been seeing this man for almost a year. She had lied to my face, eaten breakfast across from me, slept in our bed, all while belonging to someone else. I read every message twice. I read them a third time, hoping I had misunderstood, hoping I would find some innocent explanation. There was none. The evidence was overwhelming. My wife was having an affair. The man she was sleeping with, according to the messages, was named Derek. I sat in that study for 2 hours, reading and rereading those messages, my mind a maelstrom of rage and betrayal and grief. Derek. The name was familiar. Everyone in Los Angeles knew Derek Fontaine. He was the tech billionaire, the founder of 3 successful startups. He was regularly featured in Forbes and Variety. He'd bought a house in Pacific Palisades the previous year, a modest $12 million property compared to the Whitmore estate, but still nothing to sneeze at. I had met him once, at a charity gala. He had been charming, confident, the kind of man who commanded attention when he entered a room. We had shaken hands and exchanged pleasantries. I had thought nothing more of it.
Now I understood that he had been fucking my wife behind my back for almost a year. When Victoria finally came home, I was waiting for her in the living room. She descended the stairs in a new dress as Valentino, from the spring collection, and stopped when she saw my face. "Nathaniel?" She frowned. "What's wrong?" I held up the phone. Her face went white. "Where did you find that?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "It doesn't matter."
I stood, my legs unsteady beneath me. "I know everything, Victoria. I know about Derek. I know about the affair. I know about the hotels and the lies and the messages. I know all of it." She could have denied it. She could have made an excuse, claimed the phone wasn't hers, burst into tears and begged for forgiveness. Any of those responses would have been human, understandable, perhaps even forgivable. Instead, she laughed. Of course she laughed. Victoria Crane Whitmore had never been particularly good at shame. "You found it," she said, as if I had merely misplaced my keys. "I wondered when you would." "How long?" I demanded. "How long has this been going on? Does it matter? Tell me." She sighed and sat down on the leather sofa, crossing her long legs. 10 months, she said. Give or take. We met at the Martinson party last September. One thing led to another. The Martinson party? That was last September? You've been sleeping with him for 10 months? Yes. And you've been coming home to me every night, eating breakfast with me, sleeping in our bed. Nathaniel. She held up a hand. Don't make this into something it's not. You're overreacting. I'm overreacting? My voice rose. My wife is having an affair, and you think I'm overreacting? It's just sex. She said it simply, matter-of-factly, as if she were commenting on the weather. People have affairs all the time. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything? I stared at her. Victoria, the messages, I read them. You told him you loved him. You sent him photographs of yourself. You were planning trips, making excuses, lying to me every single day. And? She met my gaze coolly. I enjoy Derek's company. He's exciting. He's passionate. He makes me feel things I haven't felt in years. Is that so terrible? You have your work. You have your family name and your board meetings and your funds. You have mistresses, I know about them, don't pretend you don't. I have Derek. We're even. Mistresses? I felt off balance, as if the ground had shifted beneath my feet. What are you talking about? Please. She waved a hand dismissively. The model in Bel Air. The actress in the Valley. Don't insult me by pretending you haven't been sleeping around for the past 5 years. I looked the other way because I didn't care. I assumed you would extend me the same courtesy. I stopped. She was wrong. I had never been unfaithful, not once, not ever. But she believed I had, and that belief told me everything I needed to know about our marriage. What do you want, Victoria? I asked quietly. What do you actually want? She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. I want to be free, she said. I want to be with someone who makes me feel alive. I want to feel something other than this nullness, this emptiness, this sense that I'm just going through the motions of a life that was chosen for me rather than by me. And Derek makes you feel that way? Derek makes me feel everything. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment I saw something raw beneath the cool facade. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm finally living. Not just existing. Living. I turned away from her and walked to the window. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, Derek Fontaine was living the life I should have been living, the life of passion and excitement and genuine connection. I want a divorce, I said. Fine, she replied. But I want half of everything. Chapter 2, The Proposition. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Victoria moved into the guest suite, declaring that she would not share a room with a man who couldn't handle the truth. She continued her routine, salons and lunches and shopping trips, as if nothing had changed. The lawyers were called, the papers drawn up, the negotiations began. Her father, Harrison Crane, flew in from Connecticut to offer his support, though his support consisted largely of disapproving looks and comments about how I had failed his daughter. I barely slept. I barely ate. I spent my days at Whitmore Capital, throwing myself into work with an intensity that alarmed my partners, and my nights alone my study, drinking whiskey and staring at the walls. The house that had once felt like a monument to my family's legacy now felt like a mausoleum, a tomb filled with the ghosts of a marriage that had died so slowly I hadn't even noticed it happening. It was on the 5th night that I made my decision. I picked up my phone and called Derek Fontaine. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice warm and amused. Nathaniel Whitmore. To what do I owe the pleasure? We need to talk, I said. Tomorrow. The beach club in Malibu. Noon. Is this about Victoria? Don't play games with me, Derek. You know exactly what this is about. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Derek spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more guarded. I'll be there, he said. But I want you to know, I love your wife. I'm not apologizing for what we've done. Neither am I. I hung up. The meeting took place at a private club in Malibu, the kind of place where the walls were thick and the staff was legally obligated to pretend they never saw you. The ocean stretched out beyond the windows, blue and endless, and the sound of the waves provided a gentle backdrop to our confrontation. Derek arrived 5 minutes late, wearing a cashmere blazer over a white linen shirt and designer jeans. He was exactly as I remembered from the charity gala, handsome, confident, the kind of man who drew eyes wherever he went. He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. You're out of your mind, he said, when I told him what I wanted. Am I? I leaned forward. You want my wife's. You can have her. But not on your terms. On mine. Derek's expression didn't change. He'd clearly been expecting this, or something like it. You're proposing what? That we just trade wise? Like some kind of swap meet? Why not? You love her. Elena loves you, doesn't she? Or does she know about us? Derek's jaw tightened. Elena doesn't know about Victoria. No one knows. Then let's keep it that way. I sat back. Think about my offer, Derek. You have 48 hours. After that, I start making phone calls. I have a very good relationship with the editors at the LA Times, and they just love stories about tech billionaires who can't keep their dick in their pants. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he laughed, a genuine, amused sound. You know what, Whitmore? You're more interesting than I thought. He stood and extended his hand again. This time, I took it. 48 hours, I said. Actually, he replied, let's do it tonight. Elena Fontaine was not what I expected. I'd done my research, of course. She was 38 years old, a former model from Sao Paulo who had given up her career when she married Derek 6 years ago. She had the kind of face that photographers loved, high cheekbone, full lips, dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets. She was 5'8", with the kind of body that came from daily SoulCycle classes and a personal trainer who cost more than most people's mortgages. But the photographs in the magazines hadn't captured her presence, the way she held herself, the quiet intensity that radiated from her, the intelligence behind those dark eyes. When Derek had called her that afternoon and explained the arrangement, she had refused. Outrageously, furiously refused. She had called me a degenerate, a pervert, a man with no moral boundaries. She had threatened to leave Derek, to take half his fortune, to expose everything. But Derek, apparently, had been very persuasive. By the time they arrived at the Whitmore estate that evening, Elena had been pacified. Not happy, her eyes were red from crying, but present. Willing, if not consenting. She's not a participant, Derek explained to me privately. She's here under protest. But she won't make a scene. Will she be in the same room as us? If that's what you require. I thought about Victoria, upstairs, waiting in our bedroom. She had been strangely quiet since I told her about my plan. No argument, no counter-proposal. She'd simply nodded and gone to shower and change. Your wife, I said to Derek, is she beautiful? Elena is the most beautiful woman I've ever known. Then I'm looking forward to meeting her. When Victoria came downstairs, she was wearing a black dress I'd bought her 3 years ago for a charity gala. It fit her like a second skin, accentuating every curve, every angle. She looked at Elena, and Elena looked at her. Something passed between them, some unspoken acknowledgement of the situation and its grotesque absurdity. Shall we? Victoria said. We went to the living room, where I had arranged the furniture to create a sort of conversation pit. 4 armchairs arranged in a square, facing each other. A bottle of champagne on ice. Candles lit on every surface. It looked like the setup for some kind of orgy, which I suppose it was, in a way. Derek and Victoria sat on one side. Victoria and I sat on the other. Elena sat between us, her posture rigid, her hands clasped in her lap. I think, I said, breaking the silence, that we should establish some ground rules. What kind of rules? Elena's voice was accented, Brazilian Portuguese underlying her English. She hadn't looked at me once since arriving. Nothing that requires explicit consent from both parties. No penetration without permission. No overnight stays. We meet here, in this house, twice a week. When we're together, we do whatever we want. When we're apart, we're faithful. How very civilized, Derek said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Victoria? I turned to my wife. Do you have any objections? She shook her head. Her eyes were fixed on Derek, hungry, eager. She had never looked at me that way. Not once in 9 years. Elena? I turned to her. Do you consent to this arrangement? Elena's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought she was going to refuse to walk out to blow the whole thing up. But then she glanced at Derek, and something in her expression shifted. "I consent," she said quietly. "Then let's begin." Part 2, The Arrangement. Chapter 3, The First Night. The first session was a disaster. Or perhaps disaster is too strong a word. Let's say it was an exercise in extreme discomfort. Everyone was tense. Derek and Victoria immediately retreated to a corner of the room, their hands all over each other, kissing with an urgency that bordered on obscene. Meanwhile, Elena and I sat in opposite armchairs, staring at each other like two strangers on a first date that had gone horribly, catastrophically wrong. "Can I get you a drink?" I finally asked. "Yes." Her voice was hoarse. "Whiskey." "Neat." I poured her a generous measure of Lagavulin from the bar. She drank it like a lifeline, her throat working as she swallowed. When she set down the glass, her hand was trembling. "Your husband," I started. "Don't." She held up a hand. "I don't want to talk about Derek." "Not here." "Not now." "Then what do you want to talk about?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, her dark eyes searching my face with an intensity that made me feel exposed. "I want to know why you're doing this." "Doing what?" "This. All of this." She gestured at the room, at Derek and Victoria, who were now on the couch, Victoria's dress hiked up around her waist, Derek's hand moving beneath it. "You could have just gotten a divorce. You could have fought for your marriage. Instead, you proposed this." I thought about how to answer. The truth was complicated, bound up in ego and revenge and a desperate need to prove that I wasn't the man Victoria said I was. I wanted to understand what Derek had that I didn't. I wanted to feel something other than the numbness that had become my constant companion. I wanted, in some twisted way, to punish myself for a marriage I had never truly been present for. "I want to understand what he sees in her," I said finally. "Derek. I want to understand what my wife has with him that I don't." Elena laughed bitterly. "And you think sleeping with me will give you that answer?" "I don't know. Maybe I just want to feel something. Anything. It's been so long since I felt like a man instead of a bank account." She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and took my hand. Her skin was warm, soft, surprisingly gentle. "Come here," she said. We ended up in the upstairs guest room. Victoria and Derek took the master suite. I could hear them through the walls, her moans, his grunts, the headboard hitting the wall with rhythmic, pounding regularity. It was humiliating. It was exhilarating. It was both at the same time. Elena was surprisingly gentle. She took her time, kissing my neck, running her fingers through my hair. She whispered things in Portuguese that I didn't understand, but that sounded beautiful anyway. When she finally lowered herself onto me, I gasped. It had been months since Victoria had touched me. And Elena was on fire. She moved with a passion that I'd only ever read about in novels, her body arching and twisting, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Afterward, as we lay in the guest bed catching our breath, she turned to me and said, "Now you know." "Know what?" "What your wife sees in Derek." She traced a finger along my chest. "He's not afraid to want things. He's not afraid to take what he wants. He's bold." She paused, searching for the word. "You're careful. You think too much." Is that a compliment or an insult? Both. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. My husband is an extraordinary man. He's also a selfish one. He doesn't think about consequences. He doesn't think about who he gets hurt. He just acts. And you love him anyway. I love him more than I should. She sat up, reaching for her dress. I loved him before he was famous. Before the money. when he was just a boy from Bakersfield with big dreams and no idea how to achieve them. I've stood by him through everything, the failed startups, the near bankruptcies, the nights when he didn't know if he could keep going. And now, her voice cracked. Now he looks at your wife like she hung the moon. I pulled her close and held her. She didn't cry, but she trembled in my arms, and I felt something shift in my chest, a softening, a connection I hadn't expected. I'm sorry, I said. I shouldn't have put you in this position. No, she agreed. You shouldn't have. But she didn't leave. She stayed in my arms until we both fell asleep, while down the hall, Derek and Victoria continued their passionate reunion. The arrangement continued for 3 months. Every Tuesday and Friday, Derek and Victoria would arrive at the Whitmore estate. We'd drink champagne, we'd make stilted small talk, and then we'd pair off. Sometimes Derek and Victoria disappeared for hours, emerging later with satisfied smiles and disheveled clothing. Sometimes they stayed in the living room, putting on a show that was more performance than passion, Victoria writhing on the couch, Derek taking her with an urgency that felt almost violent. Meanwhile, Elena and I became something I couldn't quite categorize. We weren't lovers, exactly. We were co-conspirators, two people bound together by a shared absurdity, finding comfort in each other's company because there was no one else who could understand. We talked. God, we talked. She told me about her life in South Palo, about growing up poor in a favela, about the modeling career that had taken her to Paris and Milan and New York. She told me about meeting Derek at a party in LA, about the way he'd swept her off her feet, about the wedding in Trujillo that had cost $2 million. I told her about my father, about the legacy I'd never wanted but couldn't escape. I told her about the loneliness of being a Whitmore, the expectations, the pressure, the knowledge that everything I'd ever achieved would be attributed to my last name rather than my own efforts. I told her about the model in Bel Air and the actress in the Valley, Victoria's inventions, it turned out, lies she'd told herself to justify her own infidelity. You're wrong, Elena said one night when we'd both had too much champagne. You're not a trust fund baby playing at business. You're smart. You're strategic. You see things other people miss. You don't know me. I know enough. She leaned over and kissed me, soft and slow. I know that you're lonely. I know that you married a woman who never really loved you. I know that you did something extreme because you didn't know what else to do. And I know, she pulled back, her eyes glistening. I know that I don't want to go home tonight. So she didn't. We fell asleep in each other's arms, in the guest room, while upstairs Derek and Victoria did whatever they were doing. And when I woke up the next morning, I realized something had changed. I didn't want the arrangement anymore. I wanted Elena. Chapter 4, The Confession. I want a divorce. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. We were at breakfast, Derek, Victoria, Elena, and I, the four of us sitting around the kitchen island like some dysfunctional family. The morning sun was streaming through the windows. The coffee was still hot. It was the most ordinary of moments. Victoria looked up from her phone. What? You heard me. I set down my fork. I'm done. This arrangement, this circus, it's over. I want a divorce, and I want it finalized within 60 days. Derek's expression was unreadable. Whitmore. Don't. I held up a hand. You got what you wanted. You got Victoria. Congratulations. She's yours. I'm walking away from both of them. I looked at Elena. All of them. Elena's face went pale. Nathaniel. I know. I stood up, pushing my chair back. I know this isn't what we discussed. I know I said twice a week, no overnight stays, nothing serious. But I can't do it anymore. I can't pretend that this is just sex, that you're just a pawn in my revenge against my wife. I've fallen in love with you, Elena. and if you don't feel the same way, I'll understand. But I had to say it. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of the ocean through the open windows. Elena stood up slowly. Her chair scraped against the marble floor. Nathaniel. Her voice was barely a whisper. Derek. Victoria's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't plan this. I looked at Derek. His expression had shifted, something dark and calculating moving behind his eyes. I didn't plan anything, he said. But I'm not surprised. Whitmore always did have a talent for taking things that don't belong to him. Excuse me? I stepped toward him. You're the one who was fucking my wife. And now you've moved on to mine. Derek's laugh was humorless. Looks like we're even. Nathaniel. Elena grabbed my arm. We need to talk. Alone. There's nothing to talk about. I pulled away from her. I said what I needed to say. The rest is up to you. I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and down to the beach. The Pacific stretched out before me, vast and indifferent. I sat on the sand and watched the waves roll in, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I should have felt angry, betrayed, humiliated. But what I felt, instead, was a strange sense of peace. For the first time in months, maybe years, I knew exactly what I wanted. And I had the courage to say it out loud. The only question was whether Elena would feel the same. She found me an hour later. I heard her footsteps on the sand, saw her shadow fall across me. I didn't look up. Nathaniel. Elena. She sat down next to me, close but not touching. We watched the waves together for a long moment. I talked to Derek, she said. He knows. About us. About everything. And? He's furious. He wants to destroy you. He says he'll tell everyone about the arrangement, that you engineered it, that you forced me into it. Will he? Elena shook her head. No. Because it would destroy Victoria too. And despite everything, he loves her. He won't hurt her. That's very noble of him. Nathaniel. She turned to face me. What you said this morning. Did you mean it? I finally looked at her. Her dark eyes were searching mine, filled with something I couldn't quite name. Every word, I said. I've never, she stopped, started again. I've never been in love before Derek. He was my first everything. I thought that was love. I thought it was supposed to feel like that, intense, all-consuming, like the world only existed when he was in it. And now? Now I don't know. She reached over and took my hand. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. I feel like I can be myself, all the broken, messy parts of me, without fear of judgment. I don't know if that's love. But I want to find out. I pulled her close and kissed her. She tasted like salt and champagne and something sweeter underneath. When we finally broke apart, we were both smiling. Derek's going to make this difficult, I said. Derek always makes everything difficult. She leaned her head on my shoulder. But for the first time in 6 years, I don't care. I just want to be with you. Whatever that means. Whatever it costs. I held her as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere up on the cliff, our houses stood like monuments to everything we'd been and everything we were about to become. The arrangement that had started as revenge was ending as something none of us had expected. And as I sat there with Elena in my arms, I realized that sometimes the most destructive paths lead to the most unexpected destinations. It wasn't a happy ending. Not yet. There would be lawyers and negotiations and a great deal of pain before any of us could truly move on. But it was a beginning. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to what came next. Part 3, The Aftermath. Chapter 5, The Divorce. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Victoria had retained the nastiest family law attorney in Los Angeles, a woman named Margaret Chen, who charged $1,200 an hour and had a reputation for shredding opposing counsel to pieces. She filed motions demanding full disclosure of my financial holdings, my investment accounts, my trust funds. She challenged the prenuptial agreement we'd signed, arguing that Victoria had been under duress when she'd agreed to its terms. She requested temporary spousal support that would have bankrupted me within 5 years. But the worst part wasn't the money. The worst part was the narrative. In the press, which Victoria's attorney had carefully cultivated, a narrative emerged that cast me as the villain. The cold, controlling husband who had driven his beautiful wife into the arms of another man. The trust fund baby who had never truly loved his wife. The man who had, in a fit of jealous rage, orchestrated an open marriage to punish her for falling in love. None of it was true. But truth, as they say, is the first casualty of war. Derek, to his credit, tried to stay out of it. He and Victoria had moved in together at his Pacific Palisades house, and reports in the tabloids said they were planning a wedding. He gave one interview to People magazine in which he described their love as a lighthouse in a storm. He did not mention me, the arrangement, or anything else that might have cast shadows on their fairy tale. Elena, meanwhile, had moved into a hotel. The Beverly Hills Hotel. Naturally, she was still living the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to as Derek's wife. We'd been seeing each other almost every day, meeting for lunch at obscure restaurants where no one would recognize us, taking drives up the coast to Malibu and Santa Barbara and places where we could just be two people in love without the weight of everything else pressing down on us. But even our stolen moments were shadowed by uncertainty. Elena was still legally married to Derek. She had no income of her own, no career, no prospects. Everything she had, her car, her house, her credit cards, belonged to him. If he chose to cut her off, she would have nothing. "I can't keep living like this," she said one afternoon as we sat on the balcony of my suite at the hotel, watching the sun set over the Hollywood Hills. The city spread out before us, vast and glittering, and somewhere out there, Derek Fontaine was planning his next move. I need to make a decision. Either I stay with Derek, or I leave him and figure out how to rebuild my life. What's the problem with rebuilding? She laughed bitterly. I'm 38 years old, Nathaniel. I haven't worked in 6 years. I have no savings, no skills, no education beyond high school. I was a model, and models don't age well. What exactly am I supposed to do? You're intelligent. You're resourceful. You speak 3 languages. There are 100 things you could do, such as start a business, open a restaurant, go back to school, become a life coach. I took her hand. Whatever you want. The world is full of possibilities. The world is full of possibilities for people with money and connections. She pulled her hand away. I have neither. I have a husband who controls every aspect of my existence, and a lover who is going through his own divorce and can't afford to support me. I can support you. I don't want you to support me. Her voice was fierce. I don't want to be another kept woman. I spent 6 years being Derek's trophy, his arm candy, his pretty possession. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being yours. Elena, I need time. She stood up, turning away from me. I need to figure out who I am outside of men. I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And I need you to give me that space. I wanted to argue. I wanted to pull her back, to tell her that I would take care of everything, that she never had to worry about money or security or any of the practical concerns that seemed to be crushing her. But I could see in her eyes that it wasn't what she needed to hear. Okay, I said. I'll give you space. But I want you to know my feelings aren't going to change. I'll be here when you're ready. She leaned down and kissed me, soft and lingering. I know, she whispered. That's what scares me. 2 weeks later, Elena filed for divorce. It was a clean break, no alimony, no property division, no custody battle because there were no children. Derek contested it initially, hiring his own attorneys, demanding a share of her phase of life damages. But Elena had a trump card she hadn't told me about, evidence of Derek's affair with Victoria, documented through months of the burner phone texts and photographs she'd found on his laptop. The affair had been ongoing for over a year, she discovered. Long before Derek had ever approached me about the arrangement. He and Victoria had been planning to leave their spouses for months, maybe longer. The arrangement, such as it was, had simply accelerated their timeline. Armed with this evidence, Elena negotiated a settlement that gave her $5 million and a house in Malibu, modest by LA standards, but enough to start over. Derek signed the papers on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Thursday, Elena had moved into her new home. That night, she called me. I'm ready, she said. I'm ready to find out what this is. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. I could hear the smile in her voice. I'm standing in my new house, looking at the ocean, and for the first time in years, I feel like my life is my own. And I want to spend it with you. I drove to Malibu that night. She was standing on the beach when I arrived, the moonlight silvering her hair. She ran to me as I got out of the car, throwing herself into my arms with a force that nearly knocked me over. I love you, she said over and over again. I love you, I love you, I love you. I said it back. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. Chapter 6: The Wedding. The wedding was small and private, just the two of us, a judge and a handful of witnesses. We got married in Elena's backyard in Malibu, with the Pacific Ocean as our backdrop and the sun setting in shades of gold and crimson. I wore a gray suit. She wore a white dress that she bought off the rack at a boutique in Santa Monica. It was the most beautiful wedding I'd ever seen. The judge was a retired Superior Court judge named Arthur Pemberton, who had married 2 of my cousins and understood the importance of discretion. The witnesses were Maria, my housekeeper, and her husband, Jose, who tended the gardens at the Whitmore estate. They cried throughout the ceremony. So did Elena. So, to my embarrassment, did I. When the judge pronounced us married and we kissed, the sun was disappearing below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The ocean murmured its ancient rhythm. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. It was perfect. We honeymooned in Italy, Florence, Rome, Venice. We ate too much pasta and drank too much wine and made love in hotels that cost more per night than most people earned in a month. We walked through the Uffizi and stood before Botticelli's Birth of Venus, hand in hand. We tossed coins into the Trevi fountain and made wishes we both kept secret. We were, in every sense of the word, shamelessly happy. But happiness, as they say, is fleeting. The divorce from Victoria had been finalized in the spring, and by summer, the settlement had been paid. I'd lost a great deal of money, north of $40 million, when all was said and done, but I retained the Pacific Palisades estate, my stake in Whitmore Capital, and enough liquid assets to live comfortably for the rest of my life. I was, by any objective measure, still filthy rich. The problem was that I no longer wanted to be. There's something I need to tell you, I said to Elena one morning as we sat on the terrace of our hotel in Positano, watching the fishing boats bob in the harbor. The Amalfi Coast stretched out before us, a ribbon of color and light, and somewhere in the distance, the ruins of Pompeii waited to be visited. About the future. The future? After we go home. What happens next? She set down her coffee cup. I'm listening. I want to sell the house. The Pacific Palisades estate. It's too big, too ostentatious, too full of bad memories. And I want to do something different with my life, Something that matters. Like what? I want to start a foundation. A charitable foundation focused on education for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. Kids like Derek, kids who grew up in trailer parks and foster homes and neighborhoods where the deck was stacked against them from day one. Elena's eyes softened. That's a beautiful idea. It's also a lot of work. And I want you to be a part of it. Not just as my wife, but as a partner. As someone who understands what it's like to grow up poor, to feel like the world has given up on you before you've even had a chance to begin. You want me to run it? I want us to run it together. She reached across the table and took my hand. Nathaniel Whitmore, she said. Who knew you had such a hidden depth? I have many hidden depths. I intend to explore every single one of them. We were still laughing when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and felt my blood run cold. The text was from Victoria. Have you seen the article? Call me. Now. I clicked on the link she'd sent. It was a story from the LA Times website, timestamped just 30 minutes earlier. Tech billionaire Derek Fontaine's secret scandal, inside the wife-swapping arrangement that shook Pacific Palisades. The article detailed everything. The affair, the arrangement, the meetings at the Whitmore estate. Anonymous sources, which I strongly suspected were Victoria and Derek themselves, in some twisted bid for sympathy or revenge, had given the reporter a detailed account of what had happened, painting me as the mastermind of a scheme to destroy my wife and humiliate my best friend. And at the center of it all was a photograph, grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakably depicting Derek and Victoria in an embrace at a beach house that looked very much like the Malibu property Elena now owned. This is a disaster, Elena said, scanning the article. The words blurred before her eyes. Your foundation, your reputation. I know. What are you going to do? I set down my phone. The sun was still shining, the sea still sparkling, the world still beautiful. But the moment had soured, the mood shattered. Our honeymoon, our escape from reality, it was over. The past had followed us across the ocean. I'm going to fight, I said. I'm going to fight and I'm going to win. Chapter 7, The Lawsuit. The lawsuit filed by Derek Fontaine against me was the most expensive, most acrimonious, most soul-destroying experience of my life. He accused me of affirmation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil conspiracy. He sought $100 million in damages. His attorney subpoenaed every email I'd sent for the past 5 years, every text message, every phone record. They deposed Elena for 3 days straight, trying to break her, trying to get her to admit that the arrangement had been something other than consensual. But Elena, it turned out, was made of stern stuff. She told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. She described how Derek had neglected her, how he'd become obsessed with Victoria, how he'd treated her like a possession rather than a partner. She testified that she'd entered into the arrangement willingly, even eagerly, because she'd wanted to understand what her husband saw in another woman. I wanted to feel what he felt, she said, her voice steady despite the aggressive cross-examination. I wanted to know if it was real. And I found out it wasn't. What Derek had with Victoria was just lust. What I found with Nathaniel was love. The jury deliberated for 6 days before returning a verdict in my favor. Derek's claims were dismissed in their entirety. The judge awarded me $2 million in countersuit damages for defamation. It wasn't enough to make up for what I'd been through. Nothing could be. But it was a victory, a vindication of the truth over the lies that had been spread about me. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, boom microphones extended toward us like curious creatures. The sun beat down mercilessly, and I could feel the sweat staining my shirt beneath the blazer. I took Elena's hand and faced them. I have just one thing to say, I told them. My marriage to Victoria Whitmore ended because of infidelity, hers, mine, and Derek Fontaine's. The arrangement that followed was a mistake, one I regret with all my heart. But what emerged from that mistake was the best thing that has ever happened to me. This woman beside me. I squeezed Elena's hand. I love her more than anything in this world. And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that we can build something beautiful from the wreckage of what we were. We turned and walked away, leaving the cameras and the questions behind. Part 4, The Beginning. Chapter 8, The Foundation. The Nathaniel and Elena Whitmore Foundation held its first gala 6 months later, in a rented ballroom at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. The guest list was a who's who of LA society, CEOs and celebrities and philanthropists, all gathered to raise money for a cause they believed in. Elena was radiant in a midnight blue gown that sparkled under the chandeliers. She had spent the past 6 months building the foundation from the ground up, hiring staff, establishing partnerships with schools and nonprofits, creating scholarship programs for disadvantaged youth. She had discovered, to her own surprise, that she was good at this. That she cared deeply about it. That helping others was more fulfilling than any amount of money or status. She gave a speech about her childhood in South Palo, about the teachers who believed in her, about the scholarships that had changed her life. When she mentioned that the foundation would focus on providing educational opportunities for underprivileged youth, young people who, like her, had dreamed of something more, the room erupted in applause. I watched her from the sidelines, my heart full to bursting. This was what we were meant to do. This was our purpose. After the speeches, as the guests mingled and the band played soft jazz, Derek appeared at my elbow. He looked older than I remembered. The salt in his hair had spread, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Victoria was with him, her hand on his arm, looking more beautiful than ever in a slinky gold dress. "Whitmore," he said. "Fontaine. I owe you an apology." He didn't look at me, his eyes fixed on Elena across the room. "I was wrong. About everything. About Victoria, about you, about the arrangement. I thought I could have it all, the money, the prestige, the woman next door. But it turns out that wanting something doesn't mean you deserve it. And Victoria?" Derek laughed bitterly. "Victoria, there's Victoria. She'll never be satisfied with what she has. She always wants something more, something else, someone different. I'm learning to live with it. That must be difficult." "It is." He finally turned to face me. "But it's easier than losing the one thing I actually cared about. Elena. She was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw her away for a fantasy. For an obsession. For a woman who will never love me the way she loved me. Derek, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just telling you, take care of her. She's more special than I ever realized." He walked away before I could respond, Victoria trailing behind him like an expensive shadow. Elena found me a few minutes later. She slipped her arm through mine and leaned her head against my shoulder. "I saw Derek," she said. "What did he say?" "He said he was sorry. For everything." "Do you believe him?" I thought about it. About the man Derek had been when I'd first met him, ambitious, charismatic, willing to do whatever it took to succeed. About the man he'd become, bitter, resentful, trapped in a marriage that could never fulfill him. About the long and winding road that had led us all here, to this ballroom, to this moment. "I believe he's starting to understand," I said. "That's a start." Elena kissed my cheek. "Shall we dance?" We moved out onto the floor, joining the other couples swaying to the music. The lights were soft, the champagne was flowing, and for one perfect moment, everything was exactly as it should be. I held my wife in my arms and thought about the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal, the revenge, the arrangement that had nearly destroyed everything. The pain and the humiliation and the long, dark nights when I'd wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. The way Elena had fought for herself, demanded respect, refused to be anyone's possession. The way we had found each other in the wreckage and built something new. And I thought about the future, uncertain, unpredictable, but ours to shape as we chose. The foundation. The work ahead. The lives we would touch, the children we would help, the difference we would make. The arrangement had destroyed everything I'd known. But from its ashes, something new had emerged. Something stronger. Something better. And as the music swelled and Elena smiled up at me, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. Epilogue. 1 year later. The house in Pacific Palisades sold for $28 million to a tech executive from Seattle. I used part of the proceeds to buy a smaller home in the Hollywood Hills, not nearly as grand, but warm and inviting, with a garden Elena had designed herself and a view of the city that reminded us both how far we had come. The foundation was thriving. We had awarded our first scholarships to 30 students from across California, kids from foster care, from immigrant families, from neighborhoods where college seemed like an impossible dream. Elena visited them every month, mentoring them, encouraging them, telling them her own story of poverty and possibility. The only thing between you and your future, she told them at the first annual scholarship dinner, is the willingness to believe that you deserve it. I watched her from across the room, my heart full, and thought about how different she looked now from the woman I had first met, the woman who had been dragged into an arrangement against her will, who had wept in a hotel room, who had wondered if she would ever be free. She was stronger now. Sharper. More herself than she had ever been. And I was different too. The numbness had lifted. The loneliness had faded. I woke up every morning next to the woman I loved, and I went to sleep every night grateful for the strangeness of life, the way it could take you to the darkest places and then, when you least expected it, show you the light. Derek and Victoria's wedding was held at a private estate in Montecito, attended by 500 guests and covered in every magazine from People to Vogue. The coverage described them as the most glamorous couple in Hollywood. I did not read it. Elena did, and she reported back that Victoria had cried throughout the ceremony. She's not happy, Elena said. She's never been happy. She just knows how to pretend. Does it matter? Elena considered this. No, she said finally. It doesn't. And she was right. What mattered was not the past, neither the betrayal nor the revenge, neither the arrangement nor the scandal. What mattered was the present, the life we had built, the love we had found, the foundation we had created to help others find their own way. I was 45 years old. I had been married and divorced and married again. I had lost tens of millions of dollars and gained something far more valuable. I had learned that the most destructive paths sometimes lead to the most unexpected destinations, and that the only way forward is through the pain, through the shame, through the wreckage of everything you thought you knew. I was not the man I had been. I was something better. And as the sun set over the Hollywood Hills and Elena poured us both a glass of wine, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. The End. Part 5, The Reckoning. Chapter 9, The Tell-All. The book came out 6 months after the trial. It was called The Arrangement, a true story of lust, lies, and betrayal in Pacific Palisades, and it was written by a journalist named Catherine Marsh, who had been investigating Derek and Victoria for months. Anonymous sources had fed her information about the wife-swapping arrangement, the secret meetings at the Whitmore estate, the affair that had preceded it all. The book painted me as a jealous, vindictive monster who had orchestrated the entire scheme as a form of psychological torture. I was driving back from the foundation office when Elena called to tell me about it. "Nathaniel," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Have you seen the news?" "No." "What's happened?" "Someone leaked everything. The whole story. Every detail of the arrangement. It's everywhere." I pulled over to the side of the road. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched out beside me, the ocean a turning gray under the overcast sky. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. "Show me," I said. The book excerpt published in Vanity Fair, was devastating. It described me as a controlling husband who could not accept that his beautiful wife had found love elsewhere, and claimed that I had engineered the entire arrangement as a way to humiliate both Derek and Victoria, to prove my dominance over them both. The anonymous sources, and there were many, it seemed, spoke of my coldness, my emotional unavailability, my inability to truly love anyone. Victoria, according to the book, had been a prisoner in her own marriage, trapped by a man who saw her as a possession rather than a partner. Derek was portrayed as a romantic hero, a self-made man who had found true love with Victoria and been thwarted at every turn by my jealousy and spite. Elena was barely mentioned. The journalist seemed to view her as collateral damage, another victim of my schemes, a woman who had been forced into an arrangement she never wanted. "This is Victoria," I said, setting down my phone. "She's the one who leaked it. She's been talking to the press for months. Nathaniel. She's destroying us, Elena. Everything we've built, the foundation, our reputation, the scholarships, it's all going to be tainted by this. People are going to look at us and see the arrangement. They're going to see the wife swapping. They're not going to see the work we're doing." Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. "Then we fight back," she said. "We tell our story. The real story. How? Every journalist in the country is going to take Victoria's side. She's beautiful, she's sympathetic, she's the victim. I'm the villain. That's the narrative. Then we change the narrative." I could hear the steel in her voice. "You didn't orchestrate this alone, Nathaniel. I was there. I saw everything. And I have a story to tell too." The press conference was held at the Foundation's new offices in downtown Los Angeles. Elena had arranged it in less than 48 hours, inviting every major news outlet in the city. She stood at the podium, dressed in a simple black suit, her dark hair pulled back, and she spoke without notes. "I know what you're expecting," she began. "You're expecting me to confirm what the book says, to validate the narrative of Nathaniel Whitmore as a villain and Derek Fontaine as a romantic hero. That's not what I'm here to do." The cameras flashed. The reporters leaned forward. "I'm here to tell you the truth," Elena continued. "The truth about the arrangement. The truth about what really happened in Pacific Palisades. And the truth about the man I'm married to." She told them everything. She told them about the affair, how she had discovered that Derek was sleeping with Victoria months before the arrangement ever began. She told them about the burner phone, the secret meetings, the lies she had believed. She told them about how Derek had manipulated her, controlled her, treated her like the possession for 6 years. And she told them about me. "Nathaniel Whitmore is not a monster," she said, her voice ringing through the room. "He is a man who made a mistake, a desperate, foolish mistake in a moment of pain and betrayal. But he is also the most decent, honorable, generous man I have ever known. He built a foundation to help children who grew up like me. He gave me back my life. He loved me when I didn't know how to love myself." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "I know the story that's been told about us. I know the tabloids and the talk shows and the salacious books. But I also know the truth. And the truth is this: Nathaniel Whitmore saved me. He showed me that I deserved better than what I had settled for. He gave me the courage to leave my husband and start over. And I will spend the rest of my life grateful for that." The room erupted in questions. Elena held up her hand for silence. "I have one more thing to say," she added. "If anyone wants to know the real reason this story has been told the way it has, if anyone wants to know why Victoria Whitmore and Derek Fontaine have been able to paint themselves as victims, it's because Victoria is beautiful and I am not. It's because Victoria knows how to perform for cameras and I am just a former model from Brazil who never quite fit in. It's because society will always believe the pretty lie over the ugly truth." She stepped away from the podium and walked toward me. I took her hand, and together we walked out of the room, past the cameras and the questions and the chaos. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without nightmares. Chapter 10: The New Normal. The fallout from the tell-all was swift and severe. Derek's approval ratings, the closest thing a tech billionaire has to approval ratings, plummeted. His company's stock price dropped by 15%. 3 board members resigned in protest. A planned IPO was postponed indefinitely. He became, in the parlance of the tech industry, radioactive. Victoria fared little better. Her father's shipping company lost 2 major contracts in the weeks following the book's release. The Martinson women, her closest friends, dropped her from their social circle. She became a pariah in the only world she had ever known. Elena and I, by contrast, emerged stronger than ever. The foundation received a flood of donations in the weeks after her press conference. $10 million from a tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, $5 million from a film producer in Beverly Hills, $2 million from an anonymous donor who left only a note that read, "Thank you for telling the truth." Our story, once a scandal, became something else, a cautionary tale, a redemption narrative, a reminder that even the worst mistakes can lead to something beautiful. The scholarships were renamed the Elena Whitmore Future Leaders Scholarship. The first 30 recipients became known as the inaugural class. They visited the foundation offices once a month, meeting with Elena, receiving mentorship, learning what it meant to believe in themselves. I watched her with them, the way she leaned forward when they spoke, the way she asked questions that showed she was truly listening, the way she made each of them feel like the most important person in the room. She had found her calling, and I had found mine. It took time. It took therapy, individual and couples. It took long conversations on the balcony of our Hollywood Hills home, watching the city lights flicker below us. It took the slow, patient work of rebuilding trust and intimacy and the 1,000 small moments that make up a marriage. But we got there. 1 year after the book came out, Elena told me she was pregnant. We were having dinner at our favorite restaurant in Los Feliz, tiny Italian place with checkered tablecloths and candles that dripped wax onto the white tablecloths. The waiter had just cleared our plates. Elena was nursing a glass of Barolo. I was reaching for my wallet when she said, "Nathaniel, I need to tell you something." I looked up. Her face was glowing. "I'm pregnant," she said. 4 months along. I went to the doctor yesterday. Everything looks perfect. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. A child. Our child. A baby that was half me and half her, growing inside the woman I loved. "Are you happy?" she asked, a note of uncertainty in her voice. "I know we didn't plan for this. I know it's soon. But I couldn't be happier. Is that okay?" I reached across the table and took her hand. Tears were streaming down my face, and I didn't care who saw. "It's more than okay," I said. "It's everything." Our daughter was born in the spring. We named her Sophia, after Elena's mother, who had died when Elena was 12 years old. She had Elena's dark hair and my blue eyes and a cry that could shatter glass. The first time I held her, in the delivery room at Cedars-Sinai, I understood something I had never understood before, what it meant to love unconditionally. Not the love I had felt for Victoria, which had always been tinged with expectation and disappointment. Not the love I had felt for my parents, which had always carried the weight of obligation. This was different. This was pure. This was a love that asked nothing in return. "I will spend my life," I whispered to Sophia, as she nestled against my chest, "making sure you never feel what I felt. Making sure you always know you're loved. Making sure you never have to wonder if you're enough." Elena watched us from the hospital bed, exhausted and ragged. "She already knows," she said. "She knows she's loved. She can feel it." I looked at my wife, my daughter, my family, the family I had built from the wreckage of everything I had once known. And I thought about the arrangement, about the pain and the betrayal and the long, dark journey that had brought me here. It had been worth it. Every moment of suffering, every tear, every night I had spent wondering if I would ever be happy again, it had all led to this. And as Sophia's tiny fingers curled around mine, I knew that I would never let go. Chapter 11: The Reunion. 3 years after the scandal, we ran into Derek and Victoria at a charity auction in Malibu. It was bound to happen eventually. Los Angeles society was a small world, and people who had money and power always found their way back to each other. The question was not whether we would meet again, but how we would behave when we did. Elena wore a green dress that complemented her coloring. I wore a tuxedo I had owned for years. We looked, I thought, like a couple who had their lives in order, successful, happy, at peace. Derek and Victoria looked like a couple who did not. He was thinner than I remembered, his face drawn, his eyes hollow. She stood beside him in a red dress that was far too young for her, her smile too bright, her laughter too loud. They were, I realized, performing. They had been performing for so long that they no longer knew how to stop. Our eyes met across the room. Derek nodded. Victoria looked away. Later, during the silent auction, I found myself standing next to Derek near a painting I had no intention of buying. "Whitmore," he said. "Fontaine." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than I had ever heard it. "I've been in therapy," he said. "For 2 years now. Every week, twice a week. I've been trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I threw away the best thing I ever had for something that was never real. And what have you learned?" He laughed bitterly. "I've learned that I'm an addict. I addicted to novelty, to excitement, to the thrill of the chase. Victoria was a new high for me, the beautiful, forbidden wife of another man. But highs don't last. And when they wear off, you're left with nothing but the emptiness inside. Is that why you're still with her?" "No." He glanced across the room, where Victoria was holding court near the bar. "I'm still with her because she won't let me leave. She's terrified of being alone. So she holds on, and I stay, and we pretend that this is what love looks like. It doesn't have to be. No." He turned to face me fully. "It doesn't. But it is. And I have to live with that." There was a long silence between us. Outside, the ocean murmured its ancient rhythm. Inside, the band played soft music, and the guests mingled and laughed and pretended that everything was fine. "I owe you an apology," Derek said finally. "A real one. Not the half-hearted thing I gave you at the foundation gala. The real thing. Go ahead." He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. For Victoria. For the affair. For the arrangement. For all of it. I was wrong. You were right about everything. And I will regret what I did for the rest of my life." I considered his words. I considered the years of pain and humiliation, the divorce and the lawsuit, the months of wondering if I would ever be happy again. I considered the woman I loved, the daughter I adored, the life I had built from the ashes. "Apology accepted," I said. Derek blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that." I extended my hand. "We're not friends, Derek. We'll never be friends. But I'm not interested in carrying around anger for the rest of my life. I have a wife and a daughter and a foundation that matters. I don't have time for grudges." He took my hand and shook it. His grip was firm, his palm damp with sweat. "You're a better man than I am," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm just a man who got lucky. I found someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's the only difference." I walked away before he could respond, joining Elena near the bar. She took my hand as I approached, her dark eyes searching my face. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm better than okay." I lifted her hand and kissed it. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We stayed for another hour, networking and socializing and pretending to care about the silent auction. When we left, the moon was high over the ocean, casting silver light on the water. I helped Elena into the car, then paused to look at the house one last time. Somewhere inside, Derek and Victoria were still performing. Still pretending. Still trapped in the gilded cage they had built for themselves. I felt a moment of sadness for them. Then I got into the car, and Elena reached over and took my hand, and we drove home to our daughter. Chapter 12, The Legacy. Sophia was 4 years old when she asked me where her name came from. It's from your grandmother, I told her. Your mother's mother. She was a very special person. Tell me about her. So I did. I told her about Elena's mother, Sophia, who had grown up in a favela in Sao Paulo and dreamed of giving her daughter a better life. I told her about the sacrifices Elena's mother had made, the jobs she had worked, the hours she had spent, the love she had poured into her daughter even when the world seemed determined to keep them down. Your mother is brave, I said. Braver than anyone I know. She survived everything her mother survived, and then she survived even more. And now she uses her story to help other people. Like the kids in the scholarships? Exactly like the kids in the scholarships. Sophia was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then she looked up at me with her blue eyes, my eyes, Elena always said, though I couldn't see it myself, and asked, Daddy, are you brave? I thought about the question. I thought about the arrangement, about the mistake I had made and the consequences I had suffered. I thought about the years of therapy, the hard work of rebuilding, the slow and patient process of becoming someone I could be proud of. I'm learning to be, I said. That's what Mommy says. Sophia smiled. She says being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. Your mother is very wise. I know. Sophia yawned and snuggled into my lap. Read me a story? I reached for the book on her nightstand, a collection of fairy tales with beautiful illustrations. But before I could open it, Sophia said, Daddy, tell me a real story. About you and Mommy. A real story? A true story. Not a fairy tale. I considered what to tell her. There were stories I could tell, stories of the foundation, of the scholarships, of the lives we had changed. There were stories I couldn't tell, at least not yet, the arrangement, the scandal, the darkness we had walked through to reach the light. So I told her a story about a man who had made a mistake, and a woman who had helped him find his way back. I told her about the importance of forgiveness, of others and of oneself. I told her that love was not about being perfect, it was about being present. It was about showing up, day after day, and choosing to be better than you were the day before. That's a good story, Sophia said when I finished. Can you tell me another one tomorrow night? Every night, I promised. For as long as you want. She fell asleep in my arms, and I sat there in the fading light, holding her, thinking about all the stories yet to tell. There would be more of the foundation, of Sophia's education, of the life we would build together. There would be challenges and setbacks and moments when I would wonder if I was worthy of the love I had been given. But I would face them. We would face them together, Elena and Sophia and I, a family forged in fire and tempered by time. The arrangement had destroyed everything I had known. But it had also shown me who I really was, not the man I had pretended to be, but the man I was capable of becoming. And that man, I had learned, was worth being. I kissed my daughter's forehead, set her gently in her bed, and went downstairs to join Elena, who was waiting for me with 2 glasses of wine and a smile that still, after all these years, made my heart skip. Story time, she asked. Story time, I confirmed. She asked about Sophia's grandmother. I told her everything. Elena nodded, a distant look in her eyes. She should know. She should know where she comes from. She will. We'll make sure of it. We sat together on the couch, watching the last light fade from the sky. The house was quiet, peaceful, full of the sounds of a home that was truly lived in, a child's laughter, a couple's conversation, the ordinary magic of a life shared. And as the stars appeared one by one, I thought about legacy. Not the legacy of the Whitmore name or the Whitmore fortune, but the legacy we were building day by day, choice by choice, story by story. The legacy of a man who had lost everything and found something better. The legacy of a woman who had survived everything and emerged stronger. The legacy of a child who would never have to wonder if she was loved. That was the story I wanted to tell. That was the story I would spend the rest of my life living. And it was, in every sense of the word, a happy ending. The end. Part 6, The Journey Home. Chapter 13, The Anniversary. 5 years after our wedding, Elena and I returned to Italy. We had talked about it for months, going back to the places we had visited on our honeymoon, reliving the memories, remembering who we were before the scandal, before the trial, before Sophia was born. It felt important, somehow, to trace our steps, to see if the people we had been were still somewhere inside the people we had become. We left Sophia with Elena's cousin in Sao Paulo, a trip we had planned to coincide with Elena's first return to Brazil in 6 years. Our daughter was thrilled at the prospect of meeting her extended family, and we were thrilled at the prospect of 2 weeks alone together, the way we had been when we first fell in love. The first stop was Florence, where we had spent 3 days wandering the Uffizi and eating gelato by the Arno. The city was exactly as we remembered, golden stone buildings, narrow streets, the Duomo rising majestically against the sky. We checked into the same hotel, requested the same room, and stood on the same balcony where I had first told Elena that I loved her. "Do you remember what you said?" she asked, leaning against the railing, her dark hair catching the afternoon light. "You mean the part where I compared you to Botticelli's Venus?" She laughed. That was quite a line. I meant every word. She turned to face me, her expression soft. "I know you did. That's why I fell for you." We made love that night with a tenderness we had not felt in years, not the desperate passion of our early days, but something deeper, quieter, more profound. Afterward, we lay in bed, listening to the sounds of Florence outside our window, and talked about everything and nothing. About Sophia, about the foundation, about the future. About who we had been and who we were becoming. "I was so angry when we first met," Elena admitted. "So hurt. I couldn't imagine trusting anyone again. And now I can't imagine my life without you." She reached over and took my hand. "You saved me, Nathaniel. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. You saved me from a life that would have been empty and alone and utterly without meaning." "You saved yourself," I replied. "I just gave you the space to do it." She smiled. "We're quite a team, aren't we?" "The best team I know." We spent a week in Florence, then took the train to Rome. We visited the Colosseum and the Forum and the Sistine Chapel, standing before Michelangelo's ceiling in awed silence. We ate pasta at the same restaurant where we had argued about the future, our first real fight as a couple, and laughed about it now. We threw coins into the Trevi fountain again, making wishes we had already seen come true. From Rome, we flew to Venice, the city of water and light and impossibly romantic clichés. We stayed in a small hotel near the Rialto Bridge, with a room that overlooked the Grand Canal. We rode gondolas and ate seafood and got lost in the labyrinthine streets, not caring if we ever found our way back. On our last night in Venice, we sat on the terrace of a restaurant overlooking the water, watching the moon rise over the city. "Do you remember what you told me on our honeymoon?" Elena asked. "About selling the house, starting the foundation?" "I remember. You said you wanted to do something that mattered. Something that would outlast you." She paused. "It worked, you know. The foundation has changed hundreds of lives. Maybe thousands. I corrected. We changed them. together. She shook her head. I was just the face. The person who stood up and told the story. You were the one who built the infrastructure, who raised the money, who made it all possible. Elena. Nathaniel. She took my hand. I'm not saying this to be modest. I'm saying it because it's true. And because I want you to know that I see you. All the work you do, behind the scenes, without recognition or applause. I see it. And I'm grateful. I squeezed her hand, unable to speak. Gratitude, I had learned, was the only appropriate response to love freely given. We ended our trip in Positano, where everything had unraveled and everything had begun again. We checked into the same hotel, requested the same room, and sat on the same terrace where I had first told Elena about my plans for the foundation. The view was exactly as I remembered, the cliffside town tumbling down to the sea, the fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, the sun setting in shades of gold and crimson. But something had changed. We had changed. The people sitting on that terrace were not the same people who had sat there 5 years before. They were older, wiser, more weathered by life. They had seen the worst and the best and had somehow come through the other side. What are you thinking? Elena asked. I'm thinking about how lucky we are, I replied. How incredibly, impossibly lucky. We earned it, she said. Every bit of it. Through pain and struggle and the willingness to face our demons. Speaking of demons, she held up a hand. Don't. Tonight is not for the past. Tonight is for gratitude. Then let's be grateful. I raised my glass. To us. To Sophia. To everything we've built. To everything we're going to build, she corrected and clinked her glass against mine. We sat there as the stars came out one by one, the same stars that had watched over us through the worst and the best of times. And when we finally went inside, we made love with the slow, deliberate tenderness of two people who had learned that love is not a destination but a journey, and that the journey was far from over. Epilogue, the letter. On our 10th wedding anniversary, I found a letter Elena had written to me. It was in her handwriting, beautiful, looping script I had learned to recognize over the years, and tucked inside a book of poetry she had given me as a gift. I opened it with trembling hands and read. My dearest Nathaniel, it began. If you are reading this, it means you found the letter I hid for you. I have written it many times over the years, never quite brave enough to give it to you. But on this, our 10th anniversary, I want you to know everything. I was broken when we met. Completely, utterly broken. I had been a possession, a trophy, a pretty thing to be displayed and then put away when it was no longer convenient. I had forgotten what it meant to be seen, to be truly seen, for who I was, not just for what I looked like. You saw me. From that very first night, when you looked at me with those blue eyes of yours and asked if I was okay, even though we both knew I wasn't, you saw me. And you didn't turn away. I don't know what I did to deserve you. I don't know what strange twist of fate brought us together in the most improbable of circumstances. But I am grateful, more grateful than I will ever be able to express, that it did. You taught me that love is not about perfection. It is not about never making mistakes or never hurting each other or never falling short of the ideal. It is about showing up day after day and choosing each other anyway. It is about the 1,000 small acts of kindness and patience and forgiveness that add up to a lifetime. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to love myself. Thank you for giving me Sophia, who is the light of my life and the proof that we built something beautiful from the wreckage. I love you. I have always loved you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. Yours forever, Elena. I wiped my eyes and set the letter down on the nightstand. Elena was in the kitchen, making breakfast, pancakes for Sophia, who was visiting for the weekend with her husband and their new baby. The smell of coffee and maple syrup wafted through the house. The sound of my granddaughter's laughter echoed from the nursery. I had built a life from nothing. Or rather, I had allowed Elena to help me build a life from the ruins of everything I had bought I wanted. And it was more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. I went downstairs to join my family, leaving the letter where it was, a reminder of how far we had come and how much further we had to go. Together. Always together. The end. Final chapter, the truth about happy endings. People often ask me how the story ends. They want to know if Derek and Victoria ever found happiness, if the arrangement ever truly stopped haunting us, if the pain ever fully faded. I tell them this: there is no ending. There is only the living. Derek and Victoria remain together, as dysfunctional as ever. They appear at charity events and deliver speeches about love conquering all, and then they go home to their enormous house in Pacific Palisades and fight about who was more to blame for the scandal. Their marriage is a performance, and they have been performing so long that neither of them remembers what the truth felt like. I feel sorry for them, in a way. Not because their lives are unhappy, they have money and status and all the external markers of success, but because they will never know what it feels like to be truly known by another person. They have built their lives on a foundation of lies, and lies, no matter how beautiful, eventually crumble. Elena and I are not perfect. We argue about money and parenting and whose turn it is to take out the trash. We have days when we frustrate each other beyond words and nights when we fall asleep angry, only to wake up and realize that the anger was never about the dishes or the dry cleaning or the 100 small slights that accumulate over time. It was about fear, fear of losing what we have, fear of not being enough, fear of the vulnerability that comes with loving someone completely. But we have also learned that the fear is worth it. That the vulnerability is the price of admission to a love that truly matters. That the only way to build something real is to be willing to see it destroyed. Our daughter Sophia is 17 now, a senior in high school with her mother's beauty and her father's stubbornness. She wants to be a writer, perhaps a journalist, she says, because she wants to tell stories that matter. Elena and I look at each other and smile when she says this, because we know exactly what she means. The foundation has awarded over 300 scholarships in the past decade. Our first recipients are now adults with careers and families of their own. Some of them stay in touch, Christmas cards, birthday messages, the occasional phone call to say thank you. They tell us about their lives, their children, their dreams for the future. They tell us that we changed everything. And we tell them that they changed it themselves. That we merely opened a door. That they were the ones who walked through it. This is the truth about happy endings. There is no such thing. There are only chapters, each one building on the last, each one carrying forward the lessons of the stories that came before. The happy ending is a myth we tell ourselves to get through the night. The real story is the one that continues to unfold day by day, choice by choice, love by love. I am 60 years old. I have lived long enough to see my own legacy take shape, not the legacy of the Whitmore name or the Whitmore fortune, but the legacy of a man who made a terrible mistake and found the courage to become something better. The arrangement destroyed my first marriage. It nearly destroyed my faith in myself. It cost me tens of millions of dollars and years of my life spent fighting battles I should never have had to fight. And it gave me Elena. It gave me Sophia. It gave me a second chance at a life worth living. I would make the same choice again. Every time. Without hesitation. Because the truth is this: the most destructive paths sometimes lead to the most unexpected destinations. And the most unexpected destinations are sometimes the ones we were always meant to find. I am Nathaniel Whitmore. I was a fool, a coward, a man who built walls instead of bridges. And then I was a husband, a father, a philanthropist, a man who learned too late, but not too late to matter, that the only thing worth living for is love.